All right. So again, thank you for both for being here today. This is part two of the webinar, sort of a continuation of what I've done yesterday. So today we'll be talking about a summative assessment that I use at the end of my imperialism unit for modern world history in ninth grade. So if you want to look sort of about the what was the student activities, student learning that happened prior to this. It will be uploaded in the webinar titled Political Cartoons, Documents, and Case Studies as a way to teach imperialism. So this is going to be sort of pulling on similar threads. A lot of the themes and techniques that I use throughout the lesson or the unit will show up in this final assessment. But this is something that I really like to use in particular because it hits on a lot of the skills that I really try to focus on. And as a district, we try to focus on in ninth grade about historical argumentation. But it's for me, it's a nice break for students. It's sort of situated in between two larger writing pieces, but it's the same skills just in a way that students can do it with each other through dialogue and class discussion. So we'll be focusing today on what's called a structured academic controversy. And basically, I like to use these in class. Sometimes you can do them for even smaller class discussions. In my AP Gov class, I use these just in a single lesson on should we abolish the filibuster. But this is used, you can also scale it up to a unit assessment, and I'm going to sort of walk through what that looks like and how it is. So just to contextualize a little bit, I'm going to share my screen and share some of the student resources that go into this. Well, actually, you know what? First, let me share sort of the procedures for the structured academic controversy. Perfect. So I'm going to pull this up. So our unit essential question is, can imperialism ever be justified? And so students will be walking through this format. Okay. So we'll talk about some of the prep work that will go into this just a moment, but I want to sort of set this up. I really like structured academic controversies because, as I was saying to Tony earlier, they're like a debate, but we're actually in agreement on this. I try not to have, competitions in class where there's a clear winner or loser, because for me, especially with ninth graders, it turns into more about who's the winner and who's the loser, rather than like what did you learn from the process, what did you get out of it. So structured academic controversies are really about consensus building and active listening, as opposed to debating, where I feel like you're just kind of waiting to get your next point in, right? Maybe you're listening for what you can rebut, but and there is that element here as well in terms of alternate perspectives and counterclaims, but it's not about trying to score a point against somebody, but rather have an informed dialogue and come to an agreement. So this is what's something the students would get in terms of their prep work. So the question here, can imperialism ever be justified, in side A and side B? Now, in some instances, I let students pick, and other times I'll just assign them a side. Usually, and again, the prep work that will go into this, it means they have to really understand the issue really well. And oftentimes, I'll find students, very passionately on one side or the other, and I love switching it up and making them argue against the side, really as an academic exercise. So it really starts like this. This is a partnered activity. Two groups, or side A and side B, each will have two partners. So this starts here with partners preparing, finding evidence to support your side of the argument, and crafting a position. And I have an organizer for what that looks like in just a moment. The next side here, though, is really about the position presentation. So instead of a debate where each side is kind of going tit for tat with facts, this is going to be side A would present all of the evidence, all of the reasons that they feel support their side, using evidence from the different texts that we use. So some of those texts can be case studies that we've talked about. So based on the prior session, talking about case studies of imperialism in Africa, India, China, and Japan. They can use that as evidence, but we also do some further historical document analysis where students can still, maybe they were out for a day, right? It's not, they're able to pull in other pieces of evidence that were analyzed that can still help answer this question. And what happens is side B, right? So side A is presenting the argument, yes, imperial or whatever, what is it? Side A, yes, imperialism can be justified, right? They're going to give at least 4 pieces of evidence that will go to prove that point, okay? Side B is going to be taking notes, right? And once all 4 sides, all four pieces of evidence have been presented, side B restates those back, right? And that's really where I think the active listening component to this comes in. So, for example, Tony, say you were side B, I would present my evidence to you, and then once I'm done, you say, all right, so here's what I heard you saying as to why imperialism can be justified, right? And I'd say, actually, you kind of missed my argument on the second piece, right? You actually, no, you were a little off on the understanding of this reasoning. And so it's about clarification, and that really goes, I think, to the active listening piece. And then side B does it in reverse. So what would happen is I would give my argument, Tony would restate it back to me. So it's about active listening and writing as the other side is presenting, and then the sides are reversed, okay? Side B then takes those notes, restates those main points, and again, you have that discussion. Yes, you totally understood my arguments. Yes, you got the right evidence, things to that end. Once both sides have gone, then comes the consensus building, right? And this is where I really think it separates itself from a debate. And we'll see here we have abandoning roles, right? You're no longer on side A or side B, because what you've just done is you've written down the other side's arguments, and you've made sure that you understand them correctly. And so what you're looking at the end is a piece of an organizer that has both sides analyzed, both sides with evidence and reasoning, and you say to yourself, okay, we're a group of 4 now. Where do we land on this issue? Now, it is sometimes common where a group can find consensus, but I always ask for them to explain what's the one hangup, right? Where is the what are you unable to sort of budge on personally, to try to at least understand, okay, we agreed on this point, but maybe in some instances or some cases, right? It doesn't have to be an absolute. And so I really like this because at the end of this, one, I think the consensus building is really a wonderful place for students to engage and share ideas and sort of work through the process of disagreement in an academic setting. And normally they feel pretty good, right? Students feel really, really positive about this when they come up to that final conclusion, and they're really excited to share. And then after that, they sort of reflect on the process. So this is sort of what every student gets once they have done all the prep work and we're ready to begin that discussion in class. I'm going to change my screens a little bit to talk about, all right, what is the work that students are doing beforehand? I think that just like any good debate, you need time to prep and prepare. But I think this, lessons like this are also a reflection of a classroom where students feel safe to share ideas that will be disagreed with. And so that's something that I think takes time. I think it takes a culture of a classroom culture of respect and trust that goes between students, that they know that, if they have a certain perspective that might not be in consensus, that they can still express that, as well as, being able to feel heard from the other side, right? It's not just waiting to hear your other point. So I'm going to stop for a moment and talk a little bit about the prep work that has to go into this. So this is just the organizer that students would use. Okay. And this is what would be being filled out in the moment, right? So can imperialism ever be justified? You would and your partner would have one of these sides completely filled in, okay, going into this. And then the opposite side, right? If you're side B, that would be filled in and side A would be blank. If you're side A, you and your partner's side, those four pieces of evidence would be filled in and the other side would be blank. And then as that, this is where you're recording the arguments of the other side for each piece of evidence. And again, this can be a case study or it could be from a historical document that is analyzed sort of separately. Part of this is also about asking thoughtful questions, asking probing questions, and questions that can sort of get that other, get your opposite side to explain something in more detail. So there's always a space here. Record questions that you have about opposing sources and ideas. And then here, this is where we have our final argumentation, right? So it's very similar to the elements that we would look for in a historical argument, except it's based on a discussion. So after discussing both sides of your argument, come to a consensus about which side you feel is more convincing and explain why. Your final consensus should begin by including your own definition of imperialism and state the claim that you've all come to support. After your claim, include at least one piece of evidence that you found to be the most convincing and why that helped you come to that particular consensus. So again, it's the elements that we're looking for in a DBQ, right, in a research paper, but it's allowing students to access those in a different way, right? You might not be the strongest writer, but if you can put together an oral argument, right, you can still get there. And this will go towards, use this as a building block to help support those reading and writing skills. So it's about getting kids to access those skills in ways that accounts for, different abilities and different skills in a history classroom. And that's sort of the culminating piece. So this would be turned in. So now I just want to talk a little bit about the prep work that has to go into this. So of course, this is a summative assessment. The webinar yesterday really talks about the lesson progression through those case studies. And so just looking at, this summative assessment usually takes about a week to prepare, right? It's not something that's happening just on demand. And so again, I want to show a little bit about what students are doing to bring that in. So the first thing is really a recounting of our unit. All right. And I've done this in different ways, right? Sometimes I've done this as sort of like an on-demand part of a quest, a quiz, a test, right? A test component. Sometimes I've used this as like a take-home study guide where students can bring this in as evidence. Sometimes I've done it where I've had questions, a study guide where they would come in and take this as a test. Sometimes I've had them do this in class, just with their partner, right, as part of that prep work. So I change it depending on sort of what I think is right for the pacing and where the students are at. But basically, this is the a content check on what we went through with our lesson, right? And I even go through, this was I think a relic of this document version of it here was a take-home version where I really just wanted students to go back. I think this is from when we were virtual, because I even list what lessons are on the Google Classroom, right? So this is a lesson for lesson recount of each objective of the lesson, right? So our case studies so the overview, what is it? What are the motivations of imperialism? And then here are each case study that we went through in yesterday's session, right? So Africa, the Berlin Conference, the Belgian Congo and Ethiopian resistance, India. It looks like this one is missing a question on the Sepoy Rebellion that we talked about, but the effects of the British Raj, and how the land and the people are affected. And then China, Opium Wars, the outcome of those, and how it connects to the Boxer Rebellion. And then in Japan, the Meiji Restoration and imperialism, Japanese imperialism in Korea. So these are all directly connected to learning objectives of the unit. And then sort of as a part one, and so again, students would get this in depending on what I think is the right fit for what this assessment would look like. But then there's another sort of standalone component that they also do in class as document analysis, and I want to share that. So this document, oh, here we go. So this document here, I think, really continues the theme of what I was talking about yesterday about using visual literacy in large parts to help kind of drive content and drive the message. And so this is a mix of both primary source and secondary source analysis, and a good mix of, I think, documents, cartoons that connect to each case study that we've talked about. So I provide a little historical context, our essential question, and then again, students are going to answer these documents independently in class. So this is going to be, again, sort of a standalone assessment. So each one of these can be used as evidence in one way or another, depending on your analysis of it. Sometimes you can use it for each one. They're not always very pro-imperialism or anti-imperialism, but they do lend themselves a little bit for critique. So these documents here go towards one, understanding textual, like what's the main idea of a text, how does it connect to a larger idea, but also this is gonna be the main source of evidence for that structured academic controversy. So here we talk again a little bit about motivation, this idea of wanting to control garden spots for resources, a justification from the Japanese perspective of imperialism of, hey, we imperialized and sort of look what we got out of it. However, I think the first few, are mostly text-based. There's 5. But then we're going to get into some of those skills we practiced in class of looking at visual literacy, political cartoon analysis, graphic analysis, and data analysis. So we have some of these. So students are going to be using these as their main source of evidence, where they can then say, all right, they don't know what side they're going to be on, what their side they're going to be given, and so they use this as the organizer to kind of start thinking, all right, which ones do I think lend themselves to imperialism can be justified? Which ones are lending themselves towards the lens of no, imperialism can never be justified? And so going into the structured academic controversy itself, they would have this ready to discuss with their partner, as well as that case study analysis, so that they can really have a deep and informed conversation when that controversy, the controversy comes to be. And so that's really how I summarize or assess the unit. I find that it's very successful. I love the discussions that happen because of this. I love the discussions that happen and carry on after this. And I really like how sort of the different discrete components of the structured academic controversy are reinforcing a lot of the skills that I try to build throughout the year, but also the skills that I think are a little more unique to this unit as created. And that's the presentation on the summary for the structured academic controversy.